Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical themes to Arsenal's first half success in their 1-0 win over Leeds at Ellen Road. Meanwhile, tomorrow we'll upload a video solely analyzing how and why Leeds created tactical issues for Arsenal in the second half. But in today's video, first we're going to focus on how both sides look to press, then we'll analyze Arsenal's attacking shape, and lastly we'll focus on Odegaard's positioning. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal naming an unchanged lineup that was successful against Liverpool, whereas Leeds were in a 4-2-3-1 with Harrison playing in a number 10 role and Aronson starting from the right hand side. So what we end up seeing from Leeds and what we were supposed to break down in our Leeds Arsenal preview was that they do struggle out in the wider areas, and a lot of that stems from the fact that the wide players don't track back to protect the fullbacks, and it puts a lot of emphasis on Adams and Roca to shift across to provide cover for the fullbacks to ensure that they aren't isolated in 1v1s or overloaded down those wide areas. However, in a lot of examples that resulted in Leeds conceding chances, it stemmed down those wider areas where the fullbacks didn't get protection and the opposing side was able to harm them. They also struggled dealing with set pieces, but we didn't witness that here on a consistent basis. So Arsenal largely did exploit the fullbacks, and we'll get to that in a bit, but they also were capable of bypassing the Leeds United press. Leeds reverted into a 4-4-2 out of possession, with Rodrigo and Harrison sitting in between Thomas Partey, and then the double pivot would deal with Xhaka and Odegaard pushing forward. The wide players would push out to White and Tomiyasu, and then their fullbacks would deal with Martinelli and Saka. What ended up happening here was that Arsenal could be a 4-1-5 with Odegaard and Xhaka dropping in between the gaps between the midfielders and the wide players, and at times you would see Xhaka pushing forward to occupy the center back, and Odegaard would be floating in towards that gap ahead of Strout. From there, Arsenal often struggled to build out of the back because now you have the wide players closing down the fullbacks, and then they could apply pressure to the center backs or simply sit on Thomas Partey to ensure that Arsenal can't play through that midfield zone. The manner in which Arsenal looked to bypass that was by having Tomiyasu drifting laterally in towards that midfield zone, as we've seen Zinchenko and Tierney do on a consistent basis, and Aronson would now be dragged in towards that area. From there, Xhaka would drop off in towards that midfield zone and he could receive the ball, or you could have one of the center backs playing the ball over Aronson into the path of Xhaka, as now that would force Adams out of position. There were times where the front two would look to block off the passing lane in towards Tomiyasu, and Xhaka would drop off in towards that midfield zone and Aronson would pick him up, but then that would free up space for Gabriel to be the outlet to receive the ball, and from there he could push forward and drag out one of the Leeds United attacking players, and that would allow Xhaka or Tomiyasu to receive possession. Here you have Saliba on the ball ahead of the front two and focus on Tomiyasu shifting laterally to make a 3-2-5. Aronson's pointing for someone to close him down, but Tomiyasu receives the ball from Saliba, and from here he can now carry it forward. Aronson doesn't step, so now Tomiyasu could slide the ball out toward Xhaka, which now sees him receive it in his own half, and from here Xhaka could carry the ball forward into Leeds' half and help Arsenal progress the play. But in many of these situations, what you ended up witnessing was that Tomiyasu was either pulling Aronson out of position or he was occupying the central players, and from there would create space for Gabriel, Xhaka, and at times you could even see Martinelli being able to receive the ball on that left touchline zone because Adams would step forward, or at times Adams wouldn't step forward and Tomiyasu could just simply receive the ball in that pocket of space and choose to drop it back off to the center backs or attempt to turn to shift it laterally toward Xhaka or Martinelli. Whereas on the right-hand side of Arsenal's attack, Odegaard played a key role in bypassing the press as well. He could either drop off into positions in the midfield zone to pull out Roca and then play quick 1-2s around the midfielder to then break forward in towards the Leeds United half, or you'd simply look to pick up the ball in that pocket of space behind Roca and Adams, and from there when they were looking to retreat, he'd combine with one of his teammates and help his side break forward and towards the final third. On the other hand, we didn't see much variation in terms of how Arsenal looked to press. They had Saka once again helping Gabriel Jesus step forward. White would push forward to close down Strout, and from there Sinisterra would be closed down by Saliba, or if Harrison looked to push forward, you end up seeing Sinisterra shifting laterally and Thomas Partey would pick him up and close him down in that area by trying to break up play in between the lines. The roles of Arsenal's attacking players remained, and it was largely down to Xhaka pushing forward into advanced positions to get beyond Adams or peg him back or look to occupy the center back. Out in the wider areas, Martinelli struggled because he was often dropping off to receive the ball with his back to goal, and he struggled to get the better of the Leeds United right back. From there, he was inviting Aronson and Adams to shift across to provide cover, and on several occasions in that opening half, you could see Martinelli picking up the ball, and even when he was picking it up to run at the right back, he often slowed down the attack, and it allowed Aronson and Adams, and at times even Roca, to shift across to close him down, and he struggled to create chances from that area. You're often seeing him looking to check in towards the ball and towards the central area to drag out the fullback, and on the rare occasion that Martinelli did threaten the opposing side's goal, he ended up creating separation away from the right back, as you could see that in most situations that he struggled, there was tight pressure on him from behind, and he's often facing the opposite side of the pitch ahead of Odegaard, and from there with the separation, he's capable of carrying the ball towards that side of the pitch and then squaring it across Roca and Adams into the path of Odegaard, who's making runs in towards the penalty area in the final third, or simply available in pockets of space in that midfield zone. Here we have Martinelli receiving the ball from Tomiyasu, and you can see that there's enough space ahead of the right back to carry the ball laterally, and from there he locates Odegaard in a pocket of space beyond Roca and Adams. He slides the ball out in towards that zone, and now you have a 2v1 ahead of Struijk, and from there Odegaard can now carry the ball towards goal. He notices that neither Struijk steps or Adams can recover, so he attempts to fire an effort on goal, but it's blocked. And then in one of the better chances Martinelli created in that opening half, focus on Odegaard's movement in towards the box. Martinelli plays that ball across Xhaka, and you could see that neither Roca or Adams can stop it, and it falls into the path of Xhaka, who controls it ahead of the 6-yard box. He ends up back heeling it across Struijk because they have the 2v1, and it places Gabriel Jesus in this legitimate goal scoring position, but he chips his effort wide of the net. Whereas when you look to the right hand side and you look at Arsenal's shape, White for the most part was very narrow, so he was pulling the wide player in towards that zone, and with Roca and Adams often central, now you could see them looking to play the ball around the wide player into the path of Saka to get him into 1v1s with Struijk, but it was often Odegaard's positioning that did cause Leeds problems, because Odegaard can now push forward beyond Roca in towards that gap and occupy him, or look to push forward to occupy the center back. In many of Arsenal's best moves, you have Adams caught higher up the pitch dealing with Tomiyasu or Xhaka, and then Roca covering the center of the pitch and not tracking the movement of Odegaard, who is floating in towards that pocket of space, while the wide player was closing down White. From there, he would be capable of receiving the ball, and neither the center back or Struijk could step forward, and that's where you could see him sliding the ball out to Saka to get him into 1v1s. The other alternative for Arsenal would be to have Gabriel Jesus dropping off deeper, and we witnessed this on several occasions, whether it be him dropping in towards his own half to receive the ball, or simply dropping in between Adams and Roca to take them out of the game, and they would apply their attention towards Gabriel Jesus, and once again, that would free up space for Odegaard to receive the ball in that pocket of space, to either run towards goal, or slide the ball out towards Saka so he could get into 1v1s against Struijk. But if you break down some of Arsenal's best moves in that opening half, including the goal, Saka's often on the end of them, whether it be in 1v1s against Struijk or running off the fullback or the left center back, but it often stems with Odegaard receiving the ball and winning his battle against Roca because he was getting the ball in space just in beyond him, and Roca couldn't pick him up, and from there he was creating or progressing the Arsenal attack. And then following the Rodrigo giveaway in the build-up to the goal, it's Saka nodding the ball across Struijk into the path of Odegaard, as you could see that he receives the ball beyond Adams and Roca, who's not tracking his movement, and this allows Odegaard to now carry the ball forward. He has somewhat of a 2v1 with Saka running off Struijk, and Odegaard splits the center back and Struijk to place Saka in this position where he fires a superb effort from a tight angle beyond the keeper. So as you can see, barring a few defensive issues that we'll analyze in tomorrow's video, Arsenal's first half success stemmed down their right hand side where they targeted a weak area in Leeds' backline, whereas the hosts struggled to track Odegaard's movement and positioning.